Peter, one of the most powerful workshops I saw you do was with a war veteran that came back from Afghanistan, and he
Right.
had tics. From the first session he had until the last session, you could see some of those tics starting to move from his body.
Bad news is that trauma is a fact of life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be a life sentence. There ain't no future in the past. And dreams allow us to envision a future different than our past. And I realized that yes, we have dreams, and sometimes these dreams are reality.
I don't think I've ever heard of someone's life being saved by Albert Einstein. Peter Levine, welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
I just want to say that I just said to you before off air, I wanted to honor the tremendous part of my healing journey you've had for me as a mentor and a teacher. And if I'm going to be really honest here, I don't think I would be where I am in my life without your training, without your books, without your content over the last 10 years. So before we go any further, I just want to say truly thank you for everything you've done in this space. And I'm very excited for our conversation today.
Well, gladly, gladly.
Peter Levine, can you, before we go any further, can you just maybe give a brief description about somatic experiencing and what somatic experiencing is before we go any further forward?
Sure. You know, when I first started developing somatic experiencing, it was in the late 60s into the early mid 1970s. And I was fortunate that I didn't know the definition of trauma, which would then eventually become around 1981 or so, trauma as defined as PTSD, a specific series of symptoms that characterized this definition. And at that time, it was believed that trauma was an incurable brain disorder, maybe even a brain disease, that could at best be managed with medications and helping people change negative thoughts. And it was something that, again, that happens in the brain, that happens in the mind. And I was learning, from my observations, that trauma is rather something that happens in the body. So let me give you one simple example. So let's just say a person as a child was hit by a parent or an older sibling. And if that just happened once or twice, we protect ourselves, we brace against being hit, but then we let go. But if it happens chronically, habitually, our bodies freeze in that position. And so we most likely do not realize it, that our shoulders become stuck here. And so our shoulders are telling our brain that we're about to be hit again. And so the way that the trauma is regurgitated is in the body, in places where the body became stuck. And then to find out why that didn't complete, and then to bring it to completion. So that was, again, some of the beginnings of developing somatic experiencing. That it's, again, something that happens in the body but doesn't unhappen. It stays there, it keeps replaying, and it keeps telling the brain, the mind, the psyche that the trauma is continuing unabated. So when
Thank you,
we
Peter.
complete those responses, then the body says to the brain, okay, it's over now. You can let go. So again, this is a bit of an oversimplification, but I think you get the basic idea.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And Peter, one of the most powerful workshops I saw you do was with a war veteran that came back from Afghanistan, and he
Right.
had tics. And from the first session he had until the last session, you could see some of those ticks starting to move from his body and
That's right.
from the bomb blast that he had and experienced. So
Correct.
when someone has
Correct.
experienced such a trauma like that and the blast is in a certain position from where he's had the incident, does that store then in a particular part of the body, or is it, have you noticed that it's more random, or is there more of a pattern to where it gets stored?
Well, there's definitely a pattern. I mean, you see that his bodily response is like this, and it keeps repeating. And that's what would have happened had he been in a bomb blast. He first, his head, neck, eyes wanted to try to localize the source of the threat. But again, he couldn't do anything about it. And then he was again blown up in the air, and his whole body got stuck here. As you mentioned in the first session, after the first session, when we could just kind of uncouple that sequence, that 80% of those tics, those convulsions were gone. And again, that was doing just a very simple thing that lasted only a few minutes. And that's one of the powerful things about working with the body, because when it changes in the body, it changes. It's no longer the threat, the injury, the blast replaying itself, replaying itself, replaying itself.
And how can that look, Peter, for people that have never done experiencing before, people listening in? What can experiencing look like to them?
What can experiencing look like?
Yeah, what can it look like to complete a cycle
Oh,
from
I mean, you just see it in his whole demeanor, in his whole being. It's like he's a different person. And at the end of the fifth session, the fifth session was I was able to get him to come as my guest to the Esalen Institute in Big Sur. He says something that's very clever. He said, when I first met this guy, Dr. Levine, I thought this was the biggest bunch of crap, his words. He said, but then I realized that something deeply, deeply, profoundly changed. And I said, well, I'm going to give it the go. That's one of the things that's really I like about military customs is, if something works, you do it, you see where it can go. And so anyhow, you really see how he's changed. And then also a year, and by the way, I'll remind me and I'll mention, you can watch it I think it's on YouTube. It's a short documentary. But then after that, you see he, so often when people come back from war areas, war theaters, they're unable to develop a family life because they're still so much in the war zone, the war situation. And so you see, he meets this wonderful woman, and they have a wonderful child. And so at the end, I invite them to come and visit me here in my house in Encinitas, California, and to really just see how well he's doing. Because again, the proof of the pudding, as they say, is that there is that change, that significant change in the person's whole capacity to connect with themselves and connect with others, connect, and then to begin to have a family. So anyhow, it's called Ray's story, RAY' story. I think it's Somatic Experiencing with Peter Levine. And so you can really watch his progress. And again, to see, because if he continues to move like this, it's as though the blast is still occurring. He's still thrown up into the air. And again, it's by completing these incomplete responses, which is a big component of somatic experiencing. By doing that, he then is able to let go of the past and to find himself a place in the here and now.
to bring his
And
body into the presence?
that's right. That's right. And people sometimes ask, well, what is somatic experiencing about? And what is trauma about? And so I say something like, well, trauma is really about not being able to be in the present, in the here and now. And then the goal of successful trauma transformation is that we're able to be in the present time, in the present moment. And so, again, I think that's an important part, to be in the present and also to feel more alive, to, to feel more vital, to feel more connected with oneself.
And Peter, you said then about people in the military, and I spent a period of my life in my younger years in the Royal Marines.
Oh,
And when I would see some of my friends come back from Afghanistan or Iraq, they would then have PTSD from some of the incidences they were in, and they would go to therapy. The counselor normally that was on the base, and it would just be rounds of talk therapy, and then it would be rounds of medications, and their tics and their what was going on in their body and how they would react to them would get worse and worse and worse.
yeah,
And
yeah,
this is just something that deeply touches me, because if only we had some somatic experiencing for some of these men, could have meant that some of them didn't lose their lives, and
yeah, sure.
some of them wouldn't be on heavy medications that then they had to withdraw from over a period of time with still the
Yeah,
same symptoms of the ticks and
right.
everything that they had coming back.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, talking about something, an event, doesn't really do anything to process it. We try to explain to ourselves what's happening rather than to work with what's happening. This can go on forever and it won't change because, as we were just talking about it, it won't change because the responses in the body are continuing to replay, and they're not able to complete themselves. So understanding, even having certain feelings about an event, really doesn't do very much to change it until we change what's going on in the body and what is incomplete in the bodily response.
And talking about being incomplete, I know a lot of you've been talking a lot about dreams as of late, and how dreams can play a role in trauma healing in some
Yeah.
respect.
Yes.
I'd love to hear from you what that's about and where that's come from, this new work, body of work.
A country western singer sung a song that goes something like, "There ain't no future in the past, and dreams allow us to envision a future different than our past." And they're very valuable in that way. They're guides that lead us to new possibilities, to a vibrant future, to a future that's different than our past.
Did you experience something yourself in a dream that changed something for you?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, dreams have been very, very important to me. In my most recent book, An Autobiography of Trauma, A Healing Journey, I was just meaning to do this as just as like a journal, because I'm now at the age where clearly from the moment of conception to where I am now is much, and from where I am now to when I'm no longer here is a much longer time in the past. So I was just really wanting to kind of review my life and use this as an opportunity to kind of form a narrative of my life, where I started, some of the events that were important to me. And some of them were beautiful, some of them were absolutely horrific. But I decided that I was writing that for myself. And my partner, she said, "What are you writing?" And I explained briefly what I was writing. And she said, "Can I take a look at it?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm really okay." So she looked at it and she said, "Oh, I assume this is a book that you're writing." And I said, "No way. It's too raw. It's too revealing. It's too raw. It's not something that I would necessarily want to share with the world." And she said, "Well, I really think that if you did this, it would help people tell their own stories, form their own life arc." But I still, it was, again, too raw, too vulnerable. And she said, "Well, Peter, why don't you think about it?" And my conscious mind tried to think about it, but I couldn't come up with an answer as a solution. So, as is often the case, or sometimes the case, I woke one morning from a dream, and in the dream, I'm standing in front of an open field, an open meadow, and in my hands, I have the pages of a manuscript, and I'm looking left to right, right to left, and again, I feel stuck. I don't think I have a path forward. And in that moment of complete indecision, this strong breeze came from behind and took all, and again, this is in the dream, took all these pages and lifted them into the air and into the meadow, onto the meadow where they would land, where they would land. And so when I awoke, I realized, yeah, my conscious mind was unable to make the decision, but my unconscious mind was very clear that I would leave it out into the world to land where they might land. So again, that was one example where a dream really made a decision for me. My conscious mind couldn't do that, but my unconscious, my dream time, my dream world could do that.
So interesting. Do you
And
think that that was a part of your psyche or something else that was giving you that message that this needs to go out to the world?
yeah, well, it is. I mean, it's part of the psyche. It's part of our collective psyche where we're not just isolated islands, but we're part of a bigger community, a world community. And if I could leave the world in a better place than when I found it, then I could feel like I did what I was supposed to be doing. And writing that book was a big part of that.
In the last chapter, you have a chapter called Living by Dying. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And I feel like that's a really powerful statement. I'd love for you to share what that's about for people.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's kind of interesting. Again, the arc of my life from conception to death is the story. It's the story of my life. But how the biggest challenge was to come to peace with my own mortality. And in doing that, I reconnected with the image of myself as an 18-month-old child. I think this thing fell down. Here is that child.
Yeah.
So he was, in a way, taking my hand in coming into that last chapter, the last chapter of the theater. So it was like a complete circle. This was the magical child, my inner magical child. And we all have such inner children. And it's a really gift when we can reconnect with that part of ourselves. And it's a little different than an inner child. It really isn't, well, an inner magical child. And again, that's where my autobiography kind of came to in Living by Dying. And yeah. And I think that lets me come more into peace with that last chapter. I mean, I'm still doing a ridiculous amount still of teaching and offering trainings and writing books. I'm right now in the process of writing 2 more books.
Wow.
Yeah, no kidding. One is called Trauma and Spirituality, Resilience in the Human Spirit. And another one is a sequel to the first book that I wrote, which was Waking the Tiger. And this
Wow.
one is Embracing the Tiger.
Beautiful.
uh,
Can
yeah,
you give us a little snippet about what Embracing the Tiger is about?
it's about engaging this instinct to heal, this drive towards wholeness that moves all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I wanted to also just come back on dreams. What about people that don't remember their dreams, or where do our dreams come into the equation of like healing trauma? Can they be used to heal trauma?
Absolutely.
Are they incomplete survival responses? What's been
Yep.
your
Well, they
interpretation?
often are. They often are. And they give the opportunity to envision a future that's different than the past, like I was saying. And, sometimes people even have nightmares, and nightmares are also very valuable because you can think of them as flashbacks, but in dream time, and to work with those flashbacks as a way of resolving traumatic reactions. So dreams are tremendously important, and waking dreams. One other episode in Autobiography of Trauma is in the 1970s, I was beginning to teach the beginning of SD, Somatic Experiencing, to a group of therapists from Berkeley. And then I was also doing my graduate work in medical biophysics and teaching a class to an undergraduate class. So it was a pretty long days. And there was a restaurant that I would frequent. It was called the Beggar's Banquet, and it was located on San Pablo Avenue in Berkeley. And at the end of one of these busy days, I would come to that restaurant, and the waitresses would greet me by name and would take me to the table that I would usually sit, a small table with two chairs. And they would start me with the usual, which was a warm soup, along with French bread, baguettes that were crunchy on the outside, soft and moist on the inside, and kind of like the event, the day just kind of receded, and I just was kind of settling in my life, in the end of my day. And one evening, when I was sitting there, I saw a quick shadow coming from my left side, and I looked up, and it was a man with just wild, unruly hair, and he also was wearing like a sports jacket, was at least 2 sizes too big for him. And so he pointed to that other chair, asking me, I think, to invite him, and I signaled yes. And he sat down, and I realized I was facing an image of Albert Einstein. And now remember, I'm doing graduate work in a medical biophysics field. I know that this is not something that's really happening because Einstein already was dead, but it was my imagination. Oh, but wait a minute. There's a type of imagination which is very much like dreams called active imagination. Carl Jung wrote about it. It's not mental imagery. It's not self-hypnosis or hypnosis. It's something very, very different. It's very, very powerful. I realized that, yes, it really seemed real because it was from the dream realm of active imagination. And so this went on for almost a year. Sadly, at the end, it was our last encounter. Oh, and I would ask him questions. I would ask this image of Einstein questions, but he would ask me questions about my questions. So this was the way Socrates, taught his students. They would ask him a question, then he would ask a question about the question to them. So this is what Einstein was doing for me. And again, at the end of that year, it was with tears, it was with bittersweet softness that we had our last encounter. Again, it was clear to me that this was an example of a dream-like active imagination. So about 35, 40 years ago, I was visiting my parents in New York City. And I'd spent the day downtown, going to museums and just, enjoying the great culture that New York City affords. And at the end of the day, I'm taking the train back, get off at 205th Street, climb up the hill, come to my parents' apartment, open the door, and I see the two of them sitting on a couch, on a sofa. But I also noticed above them, there was a bookshelf. And one of the books in the bookshelf was Einstein's theory of relativity. So that prompted me to ask my parents, especially my mother, or to tell her about my encounters, my imaginary encounters with Einstein. And so she stood up straight and she said, Peter, you didn't imagine that. that really happened. And I remember thinking, whoa, what is she talking about? This is crazy. And then she went on to tell me that when I was 8 months in utero, pregnant with me, 8 months, and she and my father were canoeing on this lake in New Jersey, and a strong wind came and tipped the canoe over. And as try as they might, my parents were unable to right the canoe and then to save their lives and to save mine. And in that moment of life threat, a small sailboat came by, and there was an old man with wild curly hair and
No.
a woman, and they pulled my parents to safety, and they introduced themselves as
No, no way.
Albert
Wow.
and his stepdaughter.
Wow.
So, I mean, I definitely had problems over my lifespan with my mother and, and other traumas, but she could be tremendously intuitive. And I think that's a gift that she gave to me, this intuition. And somehow she knew that. She just knew that and shared it with me. And I realized that, yes, we have dreams, and sometimes these dreams are reality.
I don't think I've ever heard of someone's life being saved by Albert Einstein.
Right. Well, again, she realized that, intuited that because he saved my life, I would always be connected with him, connected to him,
Yeah.
that he would be like a protector figure in my life,
Wow.
and again, she intuited it. And it's clear. And at different times in my life, I have at a few times felt that I needed his support, his guidance. And so I would call upon him to be there, to sit with me.
Have there been other incidences where you felt, I'm going to call in Einstein and he's going to support me through this thing? Has there been another instant where you found more support with Einstein?
Well, at one time there was a time, I don't remember if I write about that in the book. No, I think so. I think it is in one of the sections. My parents did a horrible thing. I had stolen a electric buzzer at a cousin's electrical shop in New York, in Canal Street, New York. And they realized, because I connected it with a clubhouse I made from a television box, cardboard box. And so they came and they ripped me out of my clubhouse and brought me into the living room, where they continued to interrogate me and beat me until I confessed. And when I was reviewing this, Einstein came to me and he said to my parents, you should not do this. This is a beautiful child. What you can tell him is how proud you are that he was able to think about this and to do this. But it's not okay to take it without permission. So I'm going to bring you back and we're going to give it back to him. So again, he was there to be my support system. And again, there were other times when I had, again, also questions, and he would also come to my aid. I was starting to realize that trauma is not just what happens to people in this lifetime, but it's often some things that have happened to their parents and their grandparents and their great-great-grandparents from generations back. He helped me to understand how this works and how I can help people with generational trauma and generational wisdom to support their own healing.
Beautiful. Beautiful. What a
So you
story.
see how these stories just continue and they loop back and I'm so grateful to be gifted with this intuitive sense and willingness. Some of my friends wrote little endorsements of the book, but one of my friends, he said, "No, I can't do that because nobody could believe that you had a conversation with Albert Einstein." He said, "If you take that out, then I'll write something about the book." And I said, "No, I'm not taking it out.
I'm so
But
glad you did.
he said something nice about me, maybe not about the book. But again, I think this ability to have active imagination and to enter into dream time. I mean, one of the things that I'm really excited about coming to Australia next year is I'm going to have something set up to meet with some Aboriginal people. And they know so much more about than I know about dream time. And so I'm really, really looking forward to learning more from the Aboriginal people about dream space, dream time.
Yeah, beautiful. When are you coming to Australia, Peter?
I believe it will be in early to mid April of 2026.
Beautiful, beautiful. And are you doing like a tour or are you doing training?
Well, I will do some training. I will do some public, lectures, and somebody has set something up for me to have the honor of meeting some of the Aboriginal people.
Beautiful,
So I'm
beautiful.
very excited. I've never been to Australia,
Have you
ever,
not? Have you not? You've traveled everywhere, but not been over to
but
Australia.
not Australia, not Australia.
Okay. Well, I'm actually from London, but I live in Australia now, and I don't think I'm not going back to the UK for a long time. It's a beautiful country, beautiful country. So,
Yeah,
Peter, I also wanted to ask a couple of questions from people in my community that really wanted to ask you some things, and one of them asked, "How can we support our body when it becomes so easily overwhelmed?"
right. Well, that's one of the things we have to learn through is to regulate our nervous system and our bodies. And those are skills that can be learned. It's one of the first things actually we teach in the somatic experiencing trainings is how to regulate our nervous system arousal states so that we're not overwhelmed. We may have intense feelings, intense sensations, intense emotions, but we're not overwhelmed by them. And again, that's one of the key features in somatic experiencing is learning the tools, the skills and the tools to do just that.
And what are some of those tools? What are your favorites?
Okay. Well, since if we feel sensations that are difficult and we can be guided by somebody because all sensations and feelings will crest like a wave and then recede and go back into the ocean of being, the ocean of sensations and being. And so by guiding people, by supporting them, by in a way taking their virtual hands and leading them into the arousal state and through the arousal state, and then to a settled state. So those are some of the basic tools in somatic experience. So again, we can experience intense feelings, even grief, for example. One of the things I'm going to be doing is a program this summer of helping people deal with some of the horrible things that are going on in the world today and not be overwhelmed by them. Again, that's one thing that we really can use to support people in their own healing and their own settling. Because remember, what goes up can and will come down. The wave of sensation comes up, it crests, it recedes, and goes back into the ocean of being.
Peter, how would you feel about us doing a demo like that now?
Sure, I'd be glad to. This is an exercise. I call it the VU exercise, and it can be used for many different things. But the idea is to take an easy full breath and on the exhalation to make the sound VU as though it's coming from the belly, and let the breath and the sound go all the way out, and then let the breath to come in on its own, filling belly and chest, and then repeating. So, and anybody who wants to, please be free to join me. Usually it brings up sensations of settling, of tingling, of vibration, of pleasant sensations, pleasant feelings, but it also can bring up, difficult sensations or even memories. But usually, especially if you follow it through, it will give rise to settling and settling. So I'll demonstrate, and then anybody who wants to do it, don't feel compelled in any way. But if you want to do it, please, I'd love to have you do it with me. So vibrating it here. Let the new breath come in, filling belly, chest. That's it. Nice. And Ryan, just notice sensations, feelings, thoughts, images. You say or share a little bit of what you notice.
I could feel the sensations of vibration all the way through down to my sort of heart space.
Okay.
And it felt like it was breaking it apart. I don't know
Breaking
what.
what apart?
Breaking my chest apart, like it was opening it up, opening the
Opening the
space.
chest. Gotcha. Again, that's a typical thing that happens. And there's, you know, there there are a number of reasons for this exercise. So, for example, you go out in the morning from your house and you see somebody's fallen off a bicycle and they're injured. So your guts go, ugh, they twist. And if you go out and you see the person's really hit, then your guts really twist. Yuck. And then there's that nerve called the vagus nerve that goes from the back of the brain stem down through the diaphragm to all of the organs below the diaphragm and also to the lungs and to the heart. It's the largest nerve in the body. What people don't recognize or realize is that 80% of that nerve is sensory. It's actually taking information from the guts, relaying it back up to the brain, where it gets amplified, and then the guts twist even more. Charles Darwin, in his, I think, most important book, The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals, he called this a pneumogastric nerve, gastric and pneumo, lungs. And he realized that it was responsible for gut wrench and heartbreak. So when we have that gut wrench, we want to be able to get a new signal from the gut back up to the brain that says, it's okay. The threat, the danger, the injury is no longer, it's all over. It's okay. And so I worked for a number of years to find a sound and a vibration and a breath that could do that, that could connect those sensations in our guts and let us come into a more settled place.
And is there any somatic tools that are helpful for grief?
Grief is something that's not meant to be felt alone. That's something we need to experience with others and in community. I'm actually doing a class again in Switzerland on grief, and to be held by those around us. So that the grief, let me give you a couple of examples. There's an anthropologist named Colin Turnbull, and he wrote a beautiful book on the forest people. And when somebody would lose somebody, they would have grief. But the whole tribe would come together and share the grief together. And so they would, for all day and for all night, they would cry and sob. And then in the mornings, they would go into the forest together and dance in joy and in ecstasy. So they helped take the person from the grief to joy, to exuberance, but doing it as a group, as a community. And I visited a tribe in Brazil where they had a similar understanding about grief. It's something that really has to be held by the community and not just something that we hold alone in the absence of support.
Yeah, it's something that's so different than the culture I grew up in, because my partner is Middle Eastern, and
Oh,
when there is grief in her culture, they all get together and they spend days together, all as a community.
yeah,
Everyone comes over, they bring food,
right.
and they are they spend that time together for I can't remember how long it is until that period is over, and that was something I never heard of. You know, we sort of in British culture is do it on your own, and
Right.
that's so we hold it all in, and that grief gets stored in the system in the body.
Exactly. And it plays out in symptoms in the body. So again, working, because these cultures have had rituals to deal with grief. And, like you said, in your society and my society here, there's very little in the way of rituals. So I think we have to create rituals anew that allow us to be supported in our grief and to be held together and honored in our grief.
Yeah, yeah. There's this sense that sometimes that we have to. Well, I've felt that we have to be over it by now if it's a long period of time. Oh, we got to get over it by now. You got to move on, and it's like I had grief with my when my dog died that I had for 10 years. It was such a big part of my life, such a support mechanism for me. And I still have waves of grief now, and it's been 7, 8 years later.
You
And
know, yeah. I mean, one of the things that people say about grief is that you get over it. You go through, 5 stages of grief, and then you're done with the grief. That's complete nonsense. Grief is something that's always there, but it softens, but it also opens us to joy and to new relationships. So the worst thing you can say to somebody who's in grief is, well, get over it. It happened a long time ago. And one thing I guarantee that won't help,
yeah,
and rather than saying, I'm here with you. Can I hold your hand? Can I be with you? Can I accompany you?
yeah, you don't need to do this alone. Yeah.
That's right.
Mm.
That's, nor should you try to do it alone.
I wanted to ask for people that have felt unsafe in their bodies most of their lives, how can they start to build the relationship of trust in their body again?
Well, I mean, the things that we've been talking about, when we can learn to regulate our bodies, our nervous system, and our bodies, and when we learn to trust that more and more, then we have that as a gift throughout life. I'm not sure really what more I could add to that. The bad news and the good news about trauma. Bad news is that trauma is a fact of life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Given the right support and guidance, we don't have to hold on to trauma. It does not have to be a life sentence. We will have learned from processing our trauma, but we don't have to be held by our traumas throughout our whole lives.
Can we fully resolve trauma that is a trauma that's in the body? And does that like stay long term, or is it something that's like a bit like an accordion that sort of comes and then goes and then comes and goes?
Well, or a wave, But no, I think trauma can be healed. Trauma can be transformed. And in transforming trauma, we open to different spiritual dimensions. As I was saying, one of the book that I'm working on right now in the process of writing is called Trauma and Spirituality, Resilience and the Human Spirit. So as we transform trauma into something that's deeply impactful and meaningful, then I think we don't have to live with trauma for all our lives. Oh, I mean, may have, memories of it in some way or reminiscence of it in some way, but it doesn't have to grab onto us and strangle it. It doesn't have to do that.
Peter, something that I'd love to just ask you from my own personal lock of questions here for you is how have you found this purpose drivenness to do what you do? Like you're writing multiple books at the time. You've just written a book. You're traveling over to Switzerland, coming to Australia. You've been doing this not for just a couple of years. You've been doing this for years and years and years. How do people find that laser focused drivenness, purpose? Where does that come from for you?
That is a deep, deep question. That's a deep question. I think I've always been like that. In my early adolescence, when I was a ham radio operator and learning to send Morse code and voice all over the world, to where I am right now in developing this work. In the autobiography, I asked myself a couple of questions. One question is, have I done enough? And the answer, I think, is yes, affirmative. I have done enough because it's no longer on my shoulders. It's now on the shoulders of 70 trainers, international trainers, that are teaching to about 60,000 students worldwide. And so it's not a burden on me. It's out there. So if I ask myself that question, have I done enough? I can say, yes, I have done it. Now, the other question, am I enough? That was also, again, part of the autobiography, to try to explore that aspect of, am I enough? And I think, as much as anything, that book is towards answering that question through the arc of my life.
Beautiful, beautiful. Peter, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I want to just really deeply share that it's been an absolute honor to connect with you and to hear your stories. It's something I'm going to actually listen back to multiple times, and I'm looking forward to checking out your new books and hopefully connecting with you when you come over to Australia next
Yeah,
year.
exactly. When
Yeah.
I'm down under.
Yeah, when you're down under. Yeah, I'm sure you'll love it. I'm sure you'll love
Oh,
it.
I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward. Yeah, yeah.
Peter, before we go, is there anything that you want to share to people? Anything about upcoming that you want people to feel
Oh,
into with your work?
yeah, yeah. Well, you can go to the website, Somatic Experiencing, one word.com. And there's also a connection to the traumahealing.org website for listing of therapists all over the world, and also for trainings over the world, and different videos or interviews that I've done and books that I've written. It's all on that website, somaticexperiencing.com. So I just suggest you at least take a look at it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Massively recommend. Thank you so much, Peter.